It's time for another Steam Deck handheld PC performance video. This time we're diving into a game I've spent a long time with on PlayStation and really wish Rockstar would have added crossplay to, especially with the results we get here today. So, the fifth entry of the famed GTA franchise that's been around for almost a decade and still pretty populated online. Let's dive into how the Steam Deck can run Grand Theft Auto 5. Now, before we begin, these tests were based on the Steam version of GTA 5. I do own the Epic Games version, but opted to just test Steam, especially with how much better performance we got from the Final Fantasy VII Remake test. Now, what are we looking at here? Proton and native Steam are pretty much the same on performance. You're not going to see much difference if you turn Proton on, so just use whichever one you want. With settings, by default, GTA 5 will put you on normal, which are essentially low settings for this game. It'll also default to a low resolution with 800 by 600, at least it did for me when I started a new game, so up that to 1280 by 720 or 1280 by 800. This will give you a graphical presentation that is pretty comparable to what the PlayStation 4 version gets. Some jaggies here and there, but nothing too crazy. And the performance, well, it actually depends on what type of game you're playing between campaign, online, and public versus private online rooms. As a basis, I started with playing GTA Online in a private room, which is typically what I do with friends on PS4 to not be constantly interrupted by public players. With private rooms, GTA Online plays pretty well and solid. The frame rate will typically stay between 55 and 60. While doing a lot of the faster driving, you will occasionally get dips around the 50 to 55 range. Now with the campaign, just raise that FPS just a little bit. It still dips down into the 50s when you're driving around, but it'll be a little bit higher than the private rooms are. What's 55 to 60 in the private rooms is about 58 to 60 in the campaign. Then we get to public rooms, which is all over the place. The performance here can range a lot depending on how many other players are in the room. To give some examples, a public room with 8 other players will still be pretty high in that 50 to 60 FPS range, while having 20 or more players in the room will tank that frame rate into the 35 range. But all of this is land-based that we've talked about so far. A big stress test I did was flying in the air, going much faster around all those buildings and models. Now you will get lower frame rate, but it's not too crazy, at least most of the time. If you're in those smaller private rooms where the FPS is typically around 50 to 60 on the ground, flying will get you about 40 to 45, particularly in the main city area around Vinewood and Pillbox Hill. But the bigger public rooms can really tank the frame rate. Those matches of 20 or more players where the ground-based FPS is 35 or so, flying will basically average between 28 and 30, just down into a range that makes the gameplay not so smooth. Now technically, if you want to boost the performance a little bit more, you can go into scaling options, go onto that half scale setting and make the game look pretty bad, though you're not going to get that many more frames out of it. You might get that 28 to 30, but that all depends on if the game looking bad is worth getting those 2 extra frames. And as far as battery life is concerned, fairly standard for a Steam Deck game. Playing GTA Online with high brightness is going to get you a little over 2 hours, like 2 hours 10, 12 minutes. And with lower brightness, that's going to go up to about 2 hours and 35 minutes. So what's the takeaway here? Campaign and private rooms have similar visuals to and way better performance than the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions of the game, whereas the larger public rooms are about the same performance and just a bit below with flying. And that brings us to the end. In conclusion, would I recommend GTA 5 to Steam Deck users? I would say yes. It is a bummer that the bigger public rooms can dip the frame rate under 30 while in the air, but anyone sticking to campaign, private, or small friend rooms will get an experience that looks similar to PS4 with a much higher frame rate. And that's all I have for you today. I'll be back soon with more Steam Deck videos and reviews. As always, thank you for watching, and have a great day.